So as you see, we have a panel now here, and it's one of my favorite topics which concerns us all, purpose. So today, Sue Quackenbush from Dynatrace, Hadi Hariri from JetBrains, Ulrich Irnich, formerly from Vodafone, and Stefan Bosse from Business Insider as a moderator will talk about the power of purpose, unlocking potential and innovation. So welcome on stage, Sue, Hadi, Ulrich, and Stefan.
Yes. Thank you. Is it working? Can you hear me? No, it's not working. Can we? This one is, this one's working. All right, perfect. Well, thank you for the warm introduction. I hope this will work later on, because it would be a pity not to hear you talk. Well, welcome to the panel on the power of purpose. As already has been introduced, we will be covering the big why in business, basically, and the big questions. We have a number of fantastic panelists today. The first one is Sue Quackenbush, has already been introduced. She's been working in leading roles in HR and is now the Chief People Officer at Dynatrace, and she's been in leading roles for over 15 years, I think, now. And the other one is Hadi Hariri, who's been working in developer advocacy for quite a while and is now working the open source department at JetBrains. And then we have Ulrich Irnich, Uli, as he insists, we call him on this panel, who is former Vodafone CIO and is now a senior tech advisor and has been with the telecommunications industry for well over 15 years as well. So we have a great panel today to discuss the topic of purpose. But the problem with purpose, with the term, is sort of that it's a bit fluffy sometimes. It can be like a bit sketchy to grasp. And the first question, therefore, is what would be a definition of purpose in a business context between the different layers and the different aspects of it? And I would hand that over to Sue to give us the HR perspective on the term.
Sure, thank you, and it's great to see everyone. From a purpose perspective, looking at Dynatrace, we actually have a mission, purpose, and vision. And our purpose really, the mission, purpose, and vision really guides how we orchestrate our goals, right? And how do we really run the business? And, from a purpose perspective, it is set at the organizational level. And really, when you think about that, then is supported by our values, which really help us achieve our goals and keep us aligned to where we want to go.
All right.
It's very important if you have a company purpose that you know why your company is there. And I Googled a bit, right, because there's a Kienbaum study, right, from this year in Germany, who said 60% of employees don't know company's purpose. Oh, shit. What about you, looking in the audience? Do you know your company purpose? Can you just raise your hand?
We see some raised hands at least. Half, maybe. It's a bit more than in the study, maybe.
Yeah, a bit more. But that's important, because if you want to really unlock your potential, everybody should know what's the company's purpose.
Hadi, you've been working in developer advocacy, and I imagine you've been sort of very in touch with the developer community around JetBrains, etc. Do you also see that reflected there? Is there sometimes sort of a cut between the company purpose and sort of the individual purpose of each developer?
I think, sorry, but first of all, it's very, very hard to hear you, actually. So,
it is. If there's any way to crank up the monitor boxes, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so your question was if I see, like, as Uli was saying, a divide into people that know whether they have a purpose or not.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, well, I think yes. And I think that you mentioned that purpose is very fluff, right? And we spoke about this before, that I think we're also in a very privileged industry, right? And we're in a place where the majority of us are, if we're in technology, we get to pick and choose. And often we get to pick and choose the job we want to do, and whether the job we want to do, if our purpose in life somehow aligns with the company that we're in. And I've seen this reflected in the reality as well, right? I see a lot of developers, even in our industry, that don't get to pick and choose. And they may not agree with the purpose of the company, but they have to work there because they have other purpose, right? Whether that is to support their family or whatever purpose they have in life. Yeah, so I do see a divide.
Is there something that you've also seen reflected too? Is there always like a sort of gap between sort of the employer branding side of things and then what really seeps down to the ground floor of your business and the
So I
ground
think the thing
workforce?
is, it's funny. It's about an alignment, right? So people have individual purposes, but from a business perspective, it really does help set the framework for the type of organization it is, the type of talent that it would like to attract and retain. And for those individuals who are aligned with that purpose, it meets that much more. But I would say, and there's hiring ups and downs. And to the extent that we're looking for talent that really aligns to and understands the purpose, because that drives everything we do as an organization. If there's a large gap, then you might find less retention. So over time, you want stronger alignment, and it just really helps clarify, right? And from an employer branding perspective, you do want to have people self-select in, but also self-select out if they're not really attuned to that organization.
I think that sort of leads to the second part of the title of the panel, like unlocking potential and innovation. Maybe, Hadi, you can answer a bit, like, do you have specific examples from your work? Like, how does sort of the company purpose and setting, as Sue has already mentioned, sort of the boundaries of what the company is there for, how does that then also help fostering innovation and potential in the company and development of talent, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, for those of you that have heard of JetBrains, we've been around for about 20 years, if not more. And our initial slogan was, develop with pleasure. And our whole purpose was to essentially make it a pleasurable experience for developers to do their work. Nowadays, our motto or slogan or whatever you want to call it is the drive to develop. But at the end of the day, anyone that joins JetBrains clearly knows what they're doing, right? They're joining to create tooling for developers so that they can get their work done in a better way, in a more enjoyable way. And that is like our mission. That is what we want to do. And also, more importantly, we really want to have an impact, right? And so for us, as a company, it's very important that it's not just about, being a sustainable company, because we're a self-funded company, being sustainable, but it's also we want to have an impact on the world, right? So as I always like to say, when someone asks you, what do? You say, well, have you ever used Duolingo, right? The app Duolingo? Well, we create the language that Duolingo is written in, right? That's the kind of impact that we want to have.
And that's, when I look back to my former company at Vodafone, right? The purpose is pretty clear, connect for a better future. Now, of course, the telecom industry has connecting services, that's for clear. But drilling down to say, we want to make an impact on the digital society, we want to get inclusion, so that means that all people can embrace that kind of services. And number 3, using technology to make an impact to our planet, because we have just one. And having that, I would say, resonates with our workforce very, very much, because everything what you're doing, you can contribute to that. And that's, from my perspective, the most important thing, that you find in your purpose something you can contribute to, a higher thing, not just doing a code or doing a job or doing something, really to a higher sense.
Does that then also, just before you jump in, Sue, does that also translate to sort of a more better performance in the company as well, like higher motivated workforce?
Definitely, because if you look, the purpose has a direct correlation to employee engagement. if you don't know what your company is producing, you are not producing something which is worse for the world or for higher things, and also not worse for the company. So how do you feel as someone who works where you don't know, does it make sense or not? And so therefore, there's a strong correlation between employee engagement and purpose. And if the purpose is not clear, the risk that your employee engagement is low is pretty high. And in that case, you cannot unlock the full potential of your company.
Yeah, and I'll take it a little different lens too. So I fully agree with company purpose. And when we talk about our mission, purpose, and vision, right, that sets the stage. Then we really double click into our values. And one of our values is really engage with purpose. And so from an employee's perspective, engage with purpose really means you're seeking to understand, you're driving a sense of belonging. When you have that sense of belonging, that increases your employee engagement as well. So you could take in different layers and language. The other thing too is other companies also focus on, you talked about sustainability or corporate social responsibility and those programs and how it all aligns. So purpose, depending on how you're looking at it, can mean many different things, but at the end of the day, it drives a sense of belonging and commitment for the individual and the organization, and there's a relationship there. And that drives engagement, that drives productivity. I mean, so it all layers on top of each other.
So we've sort of now talked about basically the purpose of purpose, if you will, like what is the purpose of purpose in a business, in a corporate context. Then the the following question would obviously be like, how do you create that? How do you communicate with that? Because that is also the gap that you mentioned earlier on the panel. I heard your podcasts. They all have stellar podcasts and now stellar public speakers, by the way. So give that a listen if you want to. But I've listened to your podcast, and I think the first episode was about purpose. And you also spoke about a quote from Steve Jobs there, the difference between management and leadership, and sort of how management is, I wrote it down, is persuading people to do things they don't want to do, while leadership is about inspiring people to do things they never thought they could. So the first question is then, what kind of leadership does it need to sort of instill purpose and bridge that gap between company purpose and the communicated purpose, and then the individual purpose of, for example, the developers?
Especially for leaders, and you see also on employee engagement, that's mainly driven by the direct leader who's responsible and accountable for the team. The second thing is, he or she should really drive communication with the teams to understand that everybody understands the purpose, what the team is striving for. If this is not clear, it cannot be the same purpose they're on. And the other thing, and you mentioned that before, especially the purpose of life, everybody has also a purpose of life. And what you need to reflect on is your purpose of life, if you have it. Can we just make a check? Because normally only a few people have their purpose of life already found. How many have found it? Okay.
Looks like 1%.
It's lower than 1%. That's okay, because if you haven't found your purpose, you are living the purpose of somebody else. If you feel good, that's fine. But you need to think about it over time, because that's something which is in your inner circle and core. And then you can, if you found it, you can relate it to the company's purpose. Because if this is in line, you are in the ideal world. And then you can unlock your potential.
I think you've baffled all of us with the purpose of life coming in here right now. I think both Sue and Hadi are a bit stunned. But sort of, that is sort of the key question, right? How do you sort of manage to align the workforce with the company purpose, is what I get from that. So do you agree, like, what are sort of specific techniques that you could sort of use as a company to make sure there's an alignment and that you build the best ground for it?
So if I heard you correctly, because it is really hard to hear, but...
Can you maybe put it...
Yes. So with regards to alignment, right, it is key. And earlier I talked about people self-select into organizations or not join an organization, but organizations, once they set their purpose, and as they, from an employer branding perspective, really speak about the experience and how the values and the behaviors really line up to drive purpose. I mean, we've done something, we call it the culture decoder, and it essentially takes our mission, vision, and purpose. It aligns our values, our behaviors. It really drives how we recruit, because you really want to showcase, either through podcasts or through videos or through messaging, what it's like to work for an organization, and that purpose comes throughout, right? So either how you engage to what we're doing as an organization, and it's really about alignment. So you can connect it all, and I think you can do it on a simple page. It doesn't have to take tons and tons of explanation, but it's really nice to be able to showcase how they all connect together.
Hadi, do you have an opinion of that as well? Because you're sort of on the developer side of things, or have been for quite a while as a developer advocate. Is there sort of, do you agree with Sue, is like employer branding sort of the thing to communicate that into the workforce, or what are other techniques as well?
I mean, even outside of developer facing, I think that related to what you're asking, purpose takes you so far, right? And but you need other things other than purpose, right? Purpose gives you alignment, but it's also important to have other aspects in terms of leadership. And for me, and for what we try and instill a lot at JetBrains is summarized in 2 words, which is trust and care, right? And it's about trusting people to do what their mission is, what we're aligned in, and caring for people. And this sounds pompous, but it's very, very, very difficult. Very difficult. And caring for people is extremely difficult, because you can say, I care for people, but in order to actually care for people, you need to get to know them. You get to know them in all aspects. And once you only know them in all aspects, and you know them as a human being, that's when you start to care for people. And then when they reciprocate that, that's where I think you truly unlock the full potential.
Then my question would be, how do you get to know them as full people inside a company with, for example, at Dynatrace with 5,000 employees?
So I think it starts with the leaders, for sure, and their teams, and knowing their team members, and throughout the employee life cycle. So bringing on team members through the recruitment, the onboarding piece is a big, important key moment that matters in an employee's life cycle. Growth and opportunity, making sure that when we do our performance enablement, a big part of that is continuous conversations and frequent feedback, so that you're driving a relationship and the communication about how that employee is aligned with the organization, their aspirations. So it's a lot of conversations, quite honestly. It's also taking the time to really seek to understand where a person's coming from, because I agree, you could say you care, but you have to know an individual, and everyone has a different circumstance. So it's a lot about really spending time and listening, actively listening, to making sure you know what is going on in your team members' and lives.
Is there sort of, because we talked about this before the panel, that you yourself, you work fully remotely, and your company is sort of scattered, has a workforce that is scattered across the globe. Does that make it more difficult to get that alignment? Do you have to use other techniques to sort of make sure there's sort of alignment there and the outcome is the same?
So I have a fully distributed team globally. We are always on video. And so part of building alignment is also through the building of relationships. And so we are always, as a leader and managing a team, I have one-on-ones every week with my directs. We have team meetings every week. We are always on video. We travel when we need to travel. Does it take more work? Yes. It's a lot easier when you're sitting right next to someone and you can grab a cup of coffee. But being fully remote, and we have about 36% of our population that's fully remote, you have to take the time to really make sure you're making those connections. And so it does take more time, and maybe more conversations, but it's sure worth it.
Have you had a similar experience, Hadi?
Yeah, I mean, I've been remote since 2001. I've been working remotely. And at JetBrains, I've always been remote. And despite, like, you know, we're 2,500 people just below, and we have offices in Germany and many places. So there's a lot of people together, but there are some of us that are remote. I've always been remote. The majority of my team have been remote. And as you know, you say that it is extra work. You do have to take that extra step to engage with folks. You know, before, I mean, when I joined, there wasn't this thing called Google Meet. You know, like, it was like ICQ back then, if anyone remembers what ICQ is. So, you know, the chat messages, you try to do Skype and things like that to get that face-to-face time. It requires extra work, but it is worth it as well. Like, when I connect with people that I've never actually physically met, we just hit it off instantly, right? Because we've had this connection for a long time remotely.
I think the best thing, Sarah, I'll say one thing, when you're fully remote and you don't meet in person, and the first time you meet in person, it's always about how tall you are. Because you can never see, right? So you're like, oh, you're tall, oh, wow.
I think it needs extra effort to connect with people, right? We are chemical bodies, right? We love emotions. And I would say the limitation on virtual meetings is that you will not see the full emotions. Because all our bodies, we are talking with our bodies, we are smelling, we are connecting to people differently when we are sitting together. And I would say, as a leadership, we need to take care of that and make sure that not one solution fits all. We have different people, we have different mechanics to do that, and you need to be more sensible on things which happen in your team when you are just virtually on, right? And that's our experience in that.
So what I get from that is none of you are a fan of, like, getting people back to the office to sort of foster corporate culture.
It's fantastic, right? You know, we were completely out of the office. Now we try to get a bit more in the office back. And there's a distribution, to be very honest, right? We have people, they want to be in the office 5 days a week. For right or wrong, they want to be there for 5 days. And we have also people, they want to be 5 days not in the office. And there are people, they have 2 days, 3 days. You need to look for your teams and find the right solution for your team. There is no general rule to say, you need to be 2.1 days in the office and then it works. No, you need to balance that. But I think especially if you want to drive innovation, you get it faster when you have people in a room.
So, no, sometimes getting people back together can be a good thing, but I imagine, like, business meetings over Skype, that sounds horrible to me, I have to admit. But another point that we wanted to discuss is recruiting talents. Like, we have this whole aspect that purpose not only should enhance performance, but it's also there for getting the best talent out there. And then, Sisu, as you are the HR expert on this panel, would you say that it is possible to, in the future, for a company to, without a corporate purpose, to attract sort of the best talents to the company? Does it hinge on purpose, would you say?
So the question is, if you don't have a purpose, can you attract the best talent? I mean, it's always possible. However, what you really want to do is drive that alignment. And I would argue that having a company's purpose well articulated and understood really helps with making sure you're getting talent that is aligned to the business. But you can always hire if you don't have it. The question is, what's the retention? What's the engagement? What's the longevity of that talent? And you know what? Having that purpose really sets a framework that people can understand and better navigate.
So, Hadi, you said before that sort of purpose can sort of be the fluffy term, and we're privileged to be talking about it. Would you then agree that sort of purpose is sort of the glue for recruiting new talent? Is that something you would agree to?
Sorry, the last part I didn't hear. Would I?
Now, would you agree that purpose still has to be there for a company to attract the best talent out there?
Yeah, obviously, yes. I mean, if a company has purpose and you believe in what the company is doing, you're gonna feel way happier. Like you're gonna be happier, and if you're happier, you're probably gonna perform better, and you're just gonna have a sense of fulfillment for sure. What I meant though is that like not all of us are privileged to be able to do that, right? And we have to acknowledge the privilege that we have right now. Yes, and we shouldn't, you know, be judging others or thinking less or thinking that whatever because they cannot align with that purpose. And as Urs was saying, you know, we all need a purpose in life as well. And I think all of us are leaving this stage saying, oh, right, what was my purpose in life, right? Yeah.
Have you seen that sort of this term is becoming also more popular and more necessary to attract a younger workforce as well? I think that's also something that we touched on the pre-panel and Ulrich.
Yeah, definitely. You know, the world is getting a bit complicated. We have a lot of innovations and faster innovation, and it gets faster, to be very honest, right? And a purpose gives orientation because it gives the direction a company wants to strive for, and it balances in all this uncertainty a bit the direction. That's number one. Number two is having a real, and I mean a real purpose, where everybody is living that kind of purpose. It gives also a direct sense of belonging, because then you are in one community, you are in one club, you are in the same club, you are doing the same things, and that helps massively. You know, we built up a Gen Z lab, so to understand a bit what is now necessary for the next generation, not just for the Gen Z generation, but also for the other generations, to have a good communications in doing that, and that helps. This kind of communication.
I would agree. I mean, I think that, again, having that purpose defined and aligned, it just makes it a lot easier for younger generations or all generations to really make sure their connection's there. So it is very important.
Have you had any experience, like you were a little bit skeptical of the whole generational debate, right?
Well, I'm not skeptical of the Generation Z. No, I'm saying that it's. I can't answer for Generation Z. Like, I don't think, are you Generation? No, you're not Generation Z, right? So I would say that we need to ask Generation Z. But you know, you brought this question up, and I actually got in touch with our recruiters, and I said, so some of the folks that you're interviewing, how many of them asked for purpose? Now, it could well be that they know the purpose of the company before applying, and they said nobody really asked for purpose. They say they asked for diversity. They ask for whether it's a toxic or non-toxic environment. They ask for other things, right? So, and I kind of agree with Sue that like this isn't a generational thing. I think that it spans every generation. And my question is like, if we're heading to the future that we're heading, right? Whereas I don't know if you saw that billboard that once said like, I want AI to do my laundry and ironing so that I can be creative. But it seems we're going in the opposite direction. So if our job isn't going to become our purpose, where is our purpose, right? So.
But how would you explain that no one with your recruiters asks about this specific term while we are sitting here on a panel talking about it?
How would I ask what?
No, how would you explain that your recruiters aren't being asked about the term purpose? Like, why isn't it important for the workforce when we are sitting sort of here on a panel talking about the purpose for a company?
I'm still not hearing that.
I'll paraphrase, but basically, weren't you surprised that your recruiters are not being asked about purpose?
I was, okay. Was I surprised if they're not hearing our purpose? Not really. I mean, personally, I wasn't surprised. Because, not really, no. But hey, here I am, talking about purpose.
All right, then. The last question I have is sort of starting with Ulrich, because you've recently stepped down as CIO of Vodafone. And is there sort of a change in purpose that you've experienced yourself? And is it possible for a company to sort of change that successfully?
Well, I stepped down as my role at Vodafone because I want to do something different. Because I'm now practicing this role already a couple of years, right? I'm getting really used to it. But my inner purpose remains the same, right? I want to be the one serving the society on technology for good. And that doesn't change. That was also the purpose when I was CIO at Vodafone, right? And that's also what I want to do in the future, right? Getting something back on technology and also on my knowledge. And I can tell you, when you're doing such kind of things, you feel that in your body that you are doing the right things. And can you imagine when you did something for someone who didn't ask for it, how does it feel? And that's when you find your inner purpose.
I think that is the perfect end note, sort of to end on an individual level, because we're also out of time. Thank you all for discussing on this panel. I hope you all had a good time listening to these three wonderful people talk about purpose and the purpose of life as well. Thank you so much, and have a good WeAreDevelopers conference.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sue, Hadi, Uli, and Steffen. It was a pleasure to have you on stage. So I guess if you're around, then people can get into discussion with you. And next on stage here at 2:10 is the talk Smart City, Smart Mobility by Maxine Romain, Luise Hübbe, Christian Wiegand, and Lara Schermer. So we'll be back in just some minutes.